Hi everyone, nice to see you again for another edition of Canada's college football meeting place, KCU. We have plenty of upset football for you this week, and let's start in Ontario, where Ryan Sullivan will tell us about a big rivalry with a big crowd and a big result.
Yes, thank you very much, Jim. It's good to be back once again in pants. The legend of Pedro the Panda was rekindled 2 years ago when Ottawa and Carleton brought the annual Panda game back after a 15-year hiatus. Last year's game finished with a last-second Hail Mary that won the game for the Ravens. Could this year's game live up to that dramatic finish of 2014? Well, 17,000 fans at TD Place were certainly hoping so.
It was a raucous crowd that certainly got its money's worth in this one. First cue, Ravens strike first. Jesse Mills to Kyle Van Winsberg. Blackbirds up one score. Move to the second cue. The score now 10-7 for Carleton. Ottawa QB Derek Wendell hits Mitchell Baines for the major. That's the game's first lead change. There were 7 in total. The game was tied at the final whistle. Overtime took 2 tries as both teams traded majors. Carleton got a stop on Ottawa's second go-around. On the Ravens' next try, they nail it. Michael Domagala boots it right to Bank Street. Carleton defends Pedro, taking this one in dramatic fashion for a second straight year. Guelph Queens, third cue, score 9-7 Gales. Nate Hobbs heaves the leather from inside his end zone. Mateo Del Bracco makes the catch at his own 40, and he is gone. The second-year receiver goes 108 yards all the way to pay dirt. That is a new school record, and it puts Queens up by 9. Early fourth, the Griffins answer right back. Johnny Augustine weaves his way through traffic for a 25-yard major. Gales lead cut to 2. They're on the brink. But the next Queens series, Hobbs hits Jonah Pataki with his dump pass. JP takes it to the goal line. He then caps off the drive with this 1-yarder. Guelph isn't undefeated anymore as Queens stuns the Griffins by 8. Tough day at the office for Guelph slinger James Roberts, who tossed 3 picks on the day. Mac Windsor. Asher Hastings tossed 4 touchdowns, including his 28-yarder to Danny Vandervoort. I should say his name properly every now and then. Mac gives the Lancers its 5th loss, taking this one by 25. Hastings' 21 touchdowns this year equals the school's single-season record set by @Marsh2Fergs, our boy Marshall Ferguson, back in 2013. Toronto and York. The annual Red Blue Bowl saw Blues running back Alex Malone have a history-shattering day. Malone setting U of T's single-game record. Surprisingly, he scored just 1 touchdown, which didn't come until the 4th quarter. Laurier and Waterloo checked out the flow on the hop. Greg Nyhoff. That's outstanding, and so was this guy. It was the Dylan Campbell show all day long. The dude with what the kids call a sick day, 241 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. That's all you needed to know about this one. Laurier takes it by a walk. Actually, that wasn't all you need to know, I suppose. With those 241 yards, Campbell sets the Laurier all-time rushing record. So with Guelph's stunning loss to Queens, that leaves Western as the only unbeaten team in the conference. How about them Gales, though? After a 3-win season last year, Queens already has 4 wins and are firmly in control of a playoff spot.
We've made a commitment to talking about X's and O's and between the lines this year on KCU, but we would be missing the point not to talk about the Panda game as an event. More specifically, how 2 schools connected with a third party, in this case the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group, to deliver an event for the student body and the community with over 17,000 in the stands. What are the lessons that we can take away, Gord, from the event in this case?
Well, certainly OSE did an excellent job of marketing this game with over 17,000 bodies in the stands, as you mentioned, Jim. The game was a rousing success, and both the teams caught the memo as well, putting on an absolute classic on the field. I'd like to see this used more, particularly for some of those neutral-ish site in-city rivalries, say a York-Toronto, for example, where it's 2 schools that will take equal interest in how the game works out. Now, schools they have lots of experience to put on events, and they like to think that they know how to, but in these neutral site games, I think that they get much more out of putting the professionals in charge, putting it at a neutral site like they did at Lansdowne, and letting those guys take over. And it was a fantastic event and a big day for the CIS.
So, Sean, what did we learn about the game?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's nothing better for a good football event than a great football game. And these two teams have been putting on good football games for the last two contests. In 2014, you had a last-second Hail Mary to decide it for the University of Carleton. This past year, double overtime to put them over the top. Those are two heartbreaking losses for the University of Ottawa, but those are big-time wins for the fans of Ottawa. And right now, there's not too many better places to be a football fan than in Ottawa, with the Red Blacks 8-5 and on the verge of a playoff, and then you have the two university teams there in the city. A huge crosstown rivalry, massive crowds. I'll tell you what, they're moving in the right direction.
Well, there was lots of attention focused on Ottawa, but the seismic score was in Kingston, where Queens took revenge for a 66-0 loss last year to Guelph. And Gord, they did it without some key guys.
Yeah, you said it, Jim. Jesse Andrews, their biggest hoss, didn't even dress for this game. And the other guy that we've said their offense revolves around, Doug Corby, was pretty much a complete non-factor with just 3 catches for 25 yards. Even Curtis Carmichael, one of their other main playmakers, just 1 catch for 18 yards. And Dylan Walmsley, their kicking specialist, actually missed the first half of this game to write his LSATs. Now there's a CIS-ism for you. On the other side of the ball for Guelph, a trip to Kingston is never a walk in the park, one of the hardest road stadiums in the OUA. And on the defensive side of the ball for Queens, got to give credit to Greg Marshall and that much-awaited arrival of Alan Champagne, although cut short by injury, seemed to spark the Gales on that side of the ball, holding the Griffins to just 15 points.
When we come back, it's all about the green in Quebec. Stay tuned.
The CFL and our partners at Football Canada want to make sure we keep growing, promoting, and investing in a safe game. Hit! Football Canada now requires all amateur coaches to be safe contact trained by 2017. By creating a standard of safety for all in our football community, we're making an already great game even better. Make sure your youth coach is safe contact trained, because making a safe game means making a better game.
Hey, welcome back everyone to KCU. We've seen the picture from Ontario. Now let's head a little further east into Quebec and take a look at the RSEQ. The Sherbrooke Verreor have been a puzzling team this year. First, they took Laval to overtime, only to lose by a field goal. Then they went into Montreal and got pasted the very next week by the Carabin. The Green and Gold got a chance to even the score this past weekend at home with those Carabin, and we're looking to stake a claim as a team that means business in the Q. Sherbrooke's D set the tone early on, negating the Carabin run game all day. The first touche of the game came late in the third Q when Jeremy Rock hit Carl Gagnon, which gave the home side a 10-6 lead. Following series for Montreal, Gabriel Cousineau tosses up a deep ball that's nowhere near his receiver. Matthew Caron says, "Thank you." He takes it down inside the Carabin red zone. 2 plays later, the Green and Gold score another major with this 1-yard rush from Felix Marquis. Sherbrooke gets its revenge on the Carabin, taking this one by 5. Rock's 16 completions moved him into first place on the CIS all-time completions list, while his 35 passing attempts also moved the 5th-year slinger into first place all-time in passing attempts. The Rouge Or go to 5-0 with a 15-point win over Concordia. Tyrone Pierre was a man possessed for the Red and Gold. 311 receiving yards on 11 catches with 2 touches. Incredible. McGill pivot Nicholas English was outstanding in the Redmen's lopsided win over Bishops. McGill's second consecutive win makes it the first time since 2013 that the Redmen have owned a winning streak. All right, let's check out the standings board. Laval remains atop the Q standings, while second place remains up for grabs between Montreal, Sherbrooke, and the surprising Redmen. All right, over to Atlantic Canada now, where we'll kick things off in Wolfville. Mount Allison looking to snap a 2-game losing streak to the team that broke the Mounties' 13-game winning streak just 2 weeks ago. To say the Mounties were looking for a little revenge would be stating the obvious. That, and they don't want to fall any further down the conference standings. Things don't begin well for the Mounties. A Acadia's Brian Jones gets the Axemen on the board first with his corner major from Cody Cluett, 7 blank for the home side. But MTA would outscore Acadia 13 blank in the second and third Q, including this 10-yard run from Brandon Lay. The game gets put to bed late in the fourth. Dakota Brush hauls in this 9-yard pass from Lay to make it an 11-point game. By the way, what a name, Dakota Brush. Mount Allison's Keel Ambersley would add another major late in the final minutes. They'd take this one by 18. Keel Ambersley, Dakota Brush. Ashton Dixon rushed for 1 touchdown, and Randy Roseway caught one too, as X improves to 500 with a 16-point win over St. Mary's. It's time for the big board now. 3 teams tied at 500 and 1 team still winless. Who will get that coveted Loney Bowl bye? You can bet it's going to go down to the wire this year.
We asked the question at the start of the season if Quebec could be more than just red and blue, and the Sherbrooke Verreor have answered yes with the win over Montreal, where quarterback Jeremy Rock set new all-time records. Most importantly, the Sherby offense came up big, Sean.
Yeah, no, J-Rock came up big when he had to. He did not definitely have his best game of the year. There's no question about that. I think he was 14 for 35 and 144 yards passing, 4 interceptions, which definitely is not what you want when you're setting some records. But when the third quarter came around and they needed points, he got 2 touchdowns on the board for the Verreor, and that was big. And then the defense took over from there. They were outstanding down the stretch. I think they forced 6 consecutive incompletions to end the game and 2 interceptions that were massive in closing out the win. Sherbrooke have proved that they're for real.
Both Montreal and Sherbrooke are 2 games back of Laval now. Is this an opportunity for Laval to put this thing on cruise control?
Not quite yet. Now, there's a lot that they need to do wrong in order to fall out of first place. Now, both Sherbrooke and Montreal have a crack left at the Rouge et Or. Montreal gets them at home. Sherbrooke gets them in Quebec City. But you'll see the rest of Montreal's schedule fairly easy, although Concordia, no joke in that last week. And Sherby gets their shot at Laval, takes on all of a sudden a 2-game winning streak McGill team, but they should be 2-1 coming home. Laval, on the other hand, like I said, they play both Montreal and Sherbrooke. They basically need to lose both those games, and the key game for them is going to be holding serve at home versus the Verreor in that second last week of the season.
Yeah, I think the real key here is going to be that Laval's got to get a win in these next 2 weeks. If they get a win, they can start to rest some guys, prepare for the playoffs. And then the matchup, that point differential is going to play a big role in who finishes second in that conference is if Laval can get one more win in those next 2 games versus Montreal or Sherbrooke.
Coming up, X's and Olsen and the Wild Canada West. Krown Produce secures produce locally and from around the world for Canadian retailers. Krown Produce is also proud to secure sponsorship of University football on Shaw. Krown Produce, supporting Canadian retailers and Canadian amateur football.
Hey, thanks for sticking around to KCU. It's that time of the program where we welcome in the experts, Gord Randall and the coach, Sean Olsen, in this week's edition of X's and Olsen.
Thank you, Ryan, and my mob connections came through, so you guys get stuck with another episode of X's and Olsen this week with me. Last week we talked about the UBC offensive line struggling to create running lanes for running back Brandon Deschamps and how it was really hampering their attack, making them too pass heavy. On the defensive side of the ball for the Birds, we saw that their defense was trying to go with a lot of pressure looks, cover zero, things like that, and their secondary had a penchant that was developing for giving up big plays. Now, Coach, they changed and adjusted some things this week and managed to avoid giving up those big plays and managed to get a ground game going too. What did they change up that was so simple but effective for them?
Well, I'll tell you, I was actually very impressed with what the coaching staff did leading into this game. A very pivotal game in the playoff stretch run here versus the University of Alberta. They made some simple adjustments, nothing too crazy, but structured their calls and their schemes towards the strengths of their team. The first thing we'll look at here is in the run game versus Brandon Deschamps. He had 13 carries in the first half. That's 1 less than his former game high leading into this week. We'll take a look here at the first play. We have a tight zone play, a play that Brandon is very familiar familiar with. He's run this for 4 years now. They've structured their run game to something that he's very comfortable with. We'll roll this clip forward. You'll see right here the offensive line, and we'll pause it right here. You see movement on the nose tackle here. This is very, very important. You have your backside tackle getting up inside, working to the linebacker, which leaves this defensive end here free to read quarterback and mesh point. Quarterback here, Michael O'Connor, is taking a look with his eyes to make sure that he doesn't collapse down too hard. And if he does, he's got to pull the ball off the edge. But here he gives the ball to Deschamps. We'll run this forward here a little bit. Tight to the hole, good, breaks the tackle from the defensive end and finishes the run with authority. Those are the kind of plays that UBC's offense needs to bring some attitude to the mix. They also incorporated Deschamps into their passing game with some nice check down passes, got the ball into his hands in front of the linebackers and allowed him to turn up the field and got him in space so he can finish his runs with some authority. Here we go. Let's roll this forward. Simple passing scheme, get the ball in motion, crossing pattern. Let's stop it right there. Great job here of separating. We have a guy running an under, we have an over top here, and you have a check down to the Deschamps, okay? Beautifully executed in a situation where the linebackers need the drop. That's what you're trying to do with a running back like Deschamps. Get the ball to him in space so he can get up the field, turn his shoulders, and make some yards. Plan check down to Deschamps, gets the ball into the flat. He ends up turning his shoulders, getting up the field, and finishing his run with authority. That's the one thing he brings to the table. Attitude and physicality that's been missing from the UBC Thunderbirds attack. If they can continue to tap into that, they're going to have some success down the stretch run. Next play here, we'll go to some defensive footage. And let's pause it right here. Right here, you can take a look. You can see that the UBC Thunderbirds have got their scheme, three rushers. Okay, you've got 4 high defenders, okay? And you've actually got five players here in underneath zones. They played this coverage all game. I looked for cover 0 intently the entire game and could not find one example of the coverage that they played extensively for the first 4 weeks. Let's roll this forward a little bit more. You'll see another example. You see here a lot of open space underneath. Good opportunity for the quarterback to scramble, which is what he had to do a lot during this game. Next clip here, you're going to take a look. Another example of the exact same coverage. Here we go. Let's roll it forward a little bit. Another 32 set, 3 receivers to the top. Let's freeze it right there. You can see weak side half drop into his deep quarter. You have Taylor Loeffler, who has been exploited a little bit in cover 0 and in his man technique to this point in the year, playing deep quarter, and then you drop the corner off, 5 underneath. Very safe coverage, a coverage that you're not going to get beat deep at all during the course of the game. And that led to only having 1 play over 21 yards this past Saturday. Let's roll it forward here a little bit. Right there, check down pass. Everybody rallies to the ball, makes a tackle, prevents them from getting big plays. So as you can see, some simple adjustments from the UBC coaching staff to better use their personnel and create some matchups that are going to be in their favor. Through the first 4 weeks, UBC found itself giving up 9 plays of over 21 yards per game. This past weekend, they only managed to give up 1 play of exactly 21 yards. Massive improvement in their execution, massive improvement in their scheme. If they can continue on that path, they could be a factor down the stretch.
And so there you have it, folks. A couple new trends for the Birds to keep an eye on the next time they take the field in a couple weeks' action. Thanks, Ryan. Back to you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Much like our studio, the Canada West Conference is a logjam at the moment. Besides the top team, Calgary, who are undefeated, and the bottom team, Regina, who are winless, the rest of the conference are tied at 2-2. 2 of those teams are the UBC Thunderbirds and the Alberta Golden Bears, who squared off this past weekend in the Chuck. And this one was entirely UBC. The T-Birds scored 21 points in the first half to jump out to a 21-7 lead at the break. However, right before the recess, UBC linebacker Terrell Davis with a nasty horse collar on G-Bears pivot Ben Kopczynski. He was forced to leave the game and did not return while Davis was assessed a 15-yard penalty. UBC followed up the second half, scoring another 13 points in the third. They take it 39-21. The injury to Kopczynski is a major blow to an Albertan squad that has now lost its last 3 games. Calgary, Saskatchewan. The Dinos got a touchdown catch from 3 different wideouts, including Denzel Radford, seen here, and Austin Hartley, who hit pay dirt twice. The second time being this 105-yard catch and run.
Calgary improves to 5-0, muzzling the Green Dogs by 40. Dinos QB Andrew Buckley continues to stake his claim for a second straight Heck Creighton as the fifth-year slinger tossed for over 450 yards for a third consecutive game. Regina, Manitoba. Homecoming at Investors Group Field, the Bison scored 21 points in the second quarter alone to easily get by the winless Rams. Alex Vitt, seen here, caught 2 majors while racking up 182 yards on 6 receptions. Teo Dizar's masterful season continues for the Herd. He is now second in the conference to Buckley in yards per game with close to 380 per, and touchdown passes as well with 12. Let's check out the C-Dub standings. Calgary sits comfortable atop that board, still yet to be beaten, but the real fun is shaping up from second to fifth, while the playoff window gets closer to closing with every loss for the winless Rams.
UBC made adjustments, as we just saw, in X's and Olsen. And Sean, how important was that for the Thunderbirds to kind of reinvent themselves on defense?
Well, I'll tell you what, on both sides of the ball, I thought they made some smart and simple adjustments, something that was not that difficult for them to do. Defensively, they went away from that sort of pressure cover zero type of scheme that they've been trying to implement in large doses to this point of the year. It's paid massive dividends in this past game. They limited the big play opportunities for that University of Alberta offense and were able to corral them and create enough opportunities for them to win the field position battle. On the offensive side of the ball, they ran the ball for a change. They committed to the run. They got the ball in Brandon Deschamps' hands, and I'll tell you what, he is the beating heart of that offense. He's a guy that brings physicality and attitude to that team, and that's what he did this weekend in Edmonton.
Maybe the biggest question for the playoff picture right now is, are the Alberta Golden Bears in risk of free-falling right out of the playoff picture after that 2-0 start, or is that win over Saskatchewan something that's going to save them?
It very well may be. It may turn out to be an important win for them, but certainly they are in a tailspin right now. And unfortunately for them, they are just not quite holding up on both sides of the ball, particularly that defense. And we talked about UBC reestablishing their running game. They looked very effective in doing so against a maligned Alberta defense on the other side of the ball. And it just seems like nothing's going right, including with the quarterback going down this week. Always a huge issue for a Canadian football team. Things are not looking bright for Alberta, but at least they get another crack at the Thunderbirds in 2 weeks' time.
Now, I want to get the coaches and the player perspective on these back-to-back games, because every Canada West team has to go through them right now with an extra week in between the back-to-backs. Sean, as a coach, how do you prepare for it? And maybe take a look at these games and which of these 3 games has the best chance of a split?
As a coach, you're looking at it, and I guess a lot of it depends on your competition. If you have a matchup you like, then you don't mind back-to-backs. But if you're struggling to find ways to exploit mismatches and get points on the board, then it's a challenge. And it's going to be unique and interesting to see how these coaches tackle this issue. I think the team that has the best chance of splitting these two meetings is going to be the University of Regina. To this point in the season, they've just hurt themselves more than they can handle. Young team, have some talent, but just haven't been able to do enough things right on a consistent basis to find a win. And, they're going to have a Manitoba team who's got a lot of talent, but there's some youth there. And with youth, oftentimes comes some opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see if Regina can get their first win this weekend.
For me, I think the best team, to start with the second question, the best team with a chance for a split is those Golden Bears. Their backs are against the wall, and we still don't know what to expect out of UBC every time they step on the field. In terms of for the back-to-back thing as a player, I do think there's a slight advantage goes to defensive players. They've seen what the offensive formations look like. They've seen how the players get a release off the ball. You get a feel for your competition, but a lot of it depends on what your coaches do. If your coaches approach the back-to-back as really holding things back in the first game and then letting it fly in the second game, then you're way more excited for the second game than you were for the first. But if it's one of those things where all the cards are on the table in game number 1, then the second game, it purely just becomes a battle of wills and a lot of the strategy's taken out of it. So you just kind of slug it out versus a guy that you know pretty well at this point.
The AUS and the OUA continue to play through Thanksgiving weekend while the others take a bye. Here are your upcoming games. This is a weekend where turkeys are served up on the dinner table and the schedule too. So instead of looking at upcoming games, let's look at the top 10 this week, because in the 9 years I've been responsible for compiling votes for the FRC CIS top 10, I can't think of a week where we've had tougher calls to make. Let's call up that top 10 board again. Calgary, Laval, and Western obviously in the top 3, but where do you go after that? Sherbrooke beat Montreal, but don't own the series at the Caribbean. UBC beat Manitoba, but the Bisons are the only team to have given Calgary a competitive game, and UBC's non-conference win over Laval has to count for something. Matt continues to chug along while voters put Guelph anywhere between 4th and 9th. Gord, you're a voter. Tell me how you sorted through it all.
Oh boy, I had a lot of trouble with this week's top 10, particularly that number 4 spot, as you alluded to, Jim. And I ultimately went with McMaster, who, despite the fact that they haven't yet played Western and proven a lot, are still a one-loss team that in a category that is rapidly dwindling in the CIS. I have a tough time putting a 2-loss Manitoba team or even a 2-loss Montreal team at 4, particularly after Montreal lost just this last week. So that was the tiebreaker for me. And then at the back end of the top 10, Queen sneaks in there for me. But man, did I have some tough time with that middle this week.
Sean, what do you think of it as a coach? We have some ex-coaches on the panel.
Well, I'll tell you what, as a coach, I hated the top 10. I didn't put a whole lot of credence in it. Sorry, Jim, I know that it's your baby. But it's fantastic for marketing and promotions and creating a conversation. I always felt as a coach that it didn't really help our players prepare for any game. They sometimes get too caught up in the hype of where they're ranked, even though there's just not enough of a national following of educated people that understand what's happening in the CIS right now. Without interlocking games, to be honest with you, to really effectively grade people and slot them in, especially once you get past the top 5.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. That saves me from previewing Waterloo at McMaster. Next week, it's our midseason report card on Quebec and the Canada West. But now, let's get out to the game.